back in the studio with Jane Curtis this morning, and we're talking about pirates. Now, I grew up in the Midwest, Southwest, and our only pirates were cattle rustlers. So tell me about these pirates.
Well, cattle rustlers sort of count as like land pirates.
Yes, they do.
And shooting up and intercepting the stagecoach and all that
Exactly.
counts as it too. But the pirate, the true definition of the pirate involves water and boats. Okay. So you couldn't just gallop up or walk up or put something, an ambush somewhere, sit there. No, you had to be handling a ship to make it count.
Exactly. And
it goes way, way, way back. And I venture to say that first time some anthroid creature went out in a boat with something valuable in it, like food or animal skin, and so another one came along and wanted it, then bang, what happened?
That's right. We had a pirate on our hands.
We had a pirate. And that seems to have gone all through time. And I'm not going to try to give you a blow-by-blow and statistics and what happened exactly every year, because I don't think it would interest you as much as a few real live stories about these people. Okay. And some of them will be a little broader. And here and there we'll be specifically linking them with history, how they affected events in history. But one of the earliest ones you can put your finger on, there was a group known as the Hyksos, and they invaded, they were somewhere like in Mesopotamia, or in the east anyway, and they moved in on the world of the second millennium BC and just shot the whole place up. They it was who started using horses. Chariots were their contribution to, I'll say, civilization, quote unquote.
Whatever it was.
Yeah, and they really did. They just marauded everywhere and made a bad show of it sometimes. They were not very nice people. They actually occupied Egypt for 100 years or more, and the Egyptians began to get rid of them, but they hung on. The Egyptians were also somewhat bothered by pirates, who are usually referred to as Libyan pirates. And I don't know what they were called in those days. There were specific tribes off to the west of Egypt. But they marauded, and we have records of that. So it was not easy sailing everywhere and anywhere. Of course, all through the intervening time there, the period of Greek domination, Roman, the Eastern Roman Empire, all these times when the Crusaders were on the way, pirates were a huge menace. And even in the 1800s, they were. And that interesting naval expedition of ours went to survey the Dead Sea. Pirates appeared then. We had Barbary pirates in the first days of our country. So they have pretty well existed all this time, and it tells you something about people. No matter how much, again, civilization comes on top of us, we get into it. Things, of course, do improve to some extent, but there is always that urge. If somebody has something you want, you don't want to go out and work for it. You want to just take it if you can. So this is what, and the pirate became a particularly colorful figure because it was adventuresome. And I'd like to zero on one, really quite early, zero in on one in the 5th century AD. This was the King Arthur century, one of the early Christian centuries. It was the first century when the Romans were out of England. So it was a lot was going on then. We know of a certain Avila, who was a princess of some Scandinavian country at that time, and her father had betrothed her to the Crown Prince of Denmark, another one, and she didn't want any part of that. She didn't want Alf at all. So she and a couple of her girlfriends. Now, please put up our first picture. This picture is in the typical medieval style, and probably drawn a little bit after it. But we see in the boat on the left 2 figures in armor, but they have long, streaming hair. And they are clearly attacking this figure in the boat on the right. Well, this represents this princess and one of her girlfriends, several of her girlfriends got together. And I can well believe that Scandinavian young women would know how to sail in those days. So they got together and they put on sailors' clothing, or in this picture, a little more than armed sailors, as it were, and went out to seek their fortune. And before too long, they happened upon a pirate ship. And this pirate ship, of course, took over, thought they were all little boys, and just slung them into the crew, fortunately for them. And they went on with their business of being pirates. Now, the king of Denmark was not happy with this, so he said to his son, this very boy who'd been rejected, sight unseen, you are going to take this ship here and you're going to go out and get rid of these pirates. They're becoming too bothersome, so get out there. So the boy does. Before too long, he comes across and he fights bravely, and his crew fight bravely, and they board the ship. And here this young woman realizes who it is, or he perhaps announces. So all of a sudden she says, oh, I admire his courage. He's wonderful. And they marry, and the rest is history. Oh, now, this is put forth as a real happening. And as you saw in the picture, it's couched in the terms of the day, might well be. But it went on then through the centuries. From this early 5th century, the tribes streamed into England. There was a certain amount of pirating going on there, but nobody was really trading an awful lot. It was just this flow until the Vikings got into the act and began, and they were just king-sized all the way pirates. England, of course, their own coast, England, all the islands around there, Ireland. They set up a kingdom of their own in Ireland. They moved their way down the coast. They went up the Seine. Early French records, they were terrified of these people. Mm-hmm. And they would appear, they would try to make themselves, terrifying looking. Mm-hmm. So some pirates often did. But they went on down and went into the Mediterranean and eventually wound up being hired by the Eastern Roman Empire as guards, all kinds of things. So they became halfway legitimate. But they were really nothing but pirates. Mm-hmm. Now, in the same area up in Scandinavia, go on a little later, we come to the end of the 1300s. And we have the Hansa up here, this trading organization for German cities. It's a real beehive of trade between East and West. Mm-hmm. And there are lots of ships floating around here, and pirates are developing, they're discovering the place.
They're going to watch very carefully.
The way you might discover the narrow valleys if you were going after the stagecoach.
Right.
You discover a place where it's narrow, and you go out and you ambush if you can, or you just attack them frontally if you can. So the pirates began to get into that area. Well, meantime, now Queen Margaret of Denmark wants to conquer Sweden. She wants to unite the kingdoms, which was done off and on, for a long time in that area. The King of Sweden asks a gang of sailors to be hirelings for him and to go out there. And these were known as privateers usually. Oh, okay. They were not supposed to be pirate. They were under orders from somebody to get the pirates. Well, I won't go into all the details, which are very interesting. It's a kind of an interesting story to tell. But Margaret won, finally. The king lost, and Margaret tried to expel all these people who were supposed to be against the pirates, who had turned pirate, which was a pattern for the future. They're sent out to get rid of them, and they discover they can make a lot more money.
A lot more money that way, right.
And have a lot more fun if they're not. So she finally expels them. And these people were known as the Victuallian brothers. And it's kind of the same thing our word victuals comes from, because they had been working for the king. The king had hired these people, the king of Sweden. And they were up there, and they ran the blockades, and they made a big difference in the whole thing, enabled them to hold out for a considerable time. But the trade just got worse. It was just ruining the whole trade picture in the area. Well, Queen Margaret finally got rid of them, expelled them, but there were leftovers, there were remnants, and they got together and formed a sort of Robin Hood organization. And let's see the next picture at this point. This represents a scene in Hamburg, a contemporary representation of it. These people turned into even worse pirates than the others, even though they were called likadeler, even sharers. But they were being nice to the little towns along the way that had suffered so much. They were truly Robin Hood in many ways, but they were also plundering like mad. And the Hansa cities didn't like that. Well, Hamburg and all of them had ships out there trying, not only trade ships, but ships trying to get against us. And these were little ships, you know, they were not ships in the present sense. So they all fit into the North Sea and the Baltic and all. But it was a ship from Hamburg captured them finally and dragged them back to Hamburg. And this scene shows, I wish I could have been able to blow it up more, but blowing it up just ruined it completely. If you look down in the left corner, you'll be able to see there's a figure with his torso bared, and he's kneeling. And right in the corner there, look closely again, and you will see there's somebody holding a large sword, and he's in this position, and he is going to behead. That is Sturtebek, the leader of these people, and his name means chug along, empty your beaker, and he could. So that was his claim to fame. He was a famous guy for doing that. So, but this was instant action, and his crew were all similarly dispatched, done away with at that point. And now, as we go on, let's look at another picture here. Here's one. My things here are mainly in kind of chronological order. He came a little later. This is Blackbeard.
Oh, that's Blackbeard, okay.
And if you wonder about what's going on at the end of whatever that is his hair, or is he wearing something? It looks like smoke. Well, allegedly, it was. He tried to make a terrifying impression on people, and he did. And they said he always went into battle with a sword in each hand, and then he had various knives and pistols. You know, in the old days, a pistol, a great thing, it would blow up in your face half the time. But he had, we'll see now, we'll look at our next picture for a minute. And this shows a long view of him, and he's wearing some sort of bands here. And you can see where he could stuff all that in. And this some kind of tropical plant. He marauded mainly in the Caribbean and somewhat on the west coast of North America. Of course, we were not our country yet at that point.
Right.
This is earlier 1700s. But Blackbeard was, his name was actually Edward Teach. And it was hard to catch many of them later if they retired, because they would use not their real name. Yeah. And they'd come back. And of course, if he would shave and put on clean clothes, you couldn't tell that he'd been a horrible, horrible pirate. But the thing I wanted to read here, I looked, this is it. I looked in vain to find out, to explain this. Could we see the previous picture again, or is that a problem? The close-up of his face.
The one with the smoke coming out of his beard.
Whatever.
There it is.
Yeah. Now, in that one, it says, at a fierce battle, there was a fierce battle, and he made a stand with candle smoke rising from his beard. Well, it's not rising from his beard. And are those curved candles? You don't see any, they would have dripped. And certainly with all that hair around, you wouldn't have to be a genius to know you shouldn't have anything burning in the vicinity. So that one is a puzzler to me, because apparently it was real smoke coming out there. So Blackbeard was probably one of the biggest name in the area.
Yeah, that's one I think all of us have heard about.
Yeah, and songs and everything came up from it. Blackbeard was a pirate boy. Now, the next picture will show us. This you might even recognize as Sir Francis Drake.
Okay. And
Drake, we said, what? Drake, a pirate? No. Drake was the second one to circumnavigate the globe. He was the one who rescued played one of those early colonies in this country. No. But yes, because Queen Elizabeth, he was really in her pocket. She commissioned him to go out and be fight the pirates, but actually, of course, he turned into a prime pirate with her full blessing, because anything, the butt of all it was mainly Spain.
Oh,
In these privateers. Yeah, so he did a lot of that as well. And he came back after going around the globe. He did that in 1577, took 3 days. He came home in 1580, and he resumed operations in the Caribbean. And incidentally, I forgot to mention about Captain, no, wait a minute, that was Captain Kidd. No, it was Blackbeard. Blackbeard was eventually caught and beheaded, and his head was placed on a stake, and the stake was placed down here in Virginia on the Hampton River.
oh, really?
So, yeah, so a lot of this was going on and being affected by our very own, what later became the state of Virginia. Well, let's have the picture back for a second, please. That one. And Drake, you see, was knighted by the Queen and became a very honorable person. Unfortunately, he kept on going, of course, and when he was off in the Caribbean again, he got dysentery and he died, alas. So that put a long and illustrious career of actual piratism, but dressed up with fancier name. Now, another thing that happened along this same Panama coast, this is a French pirate. And when you look at him from a distance or squint, it looks as though he's got a little smile on his face. But when you look at him up close, you realize he's not smiling at all. Show us the next picture, please. And you see there.
Oh, the beard makes it look, the mustache looks like.
Yeah, no, but you can see his mouth, too, in this little beard. He was a nasty, nasty man. He had started life as an indentured, well, he started life somewhere in France, but then he had shipped over to the New World as an indentured servant. And he wasn't going to put up with that for very long. And he didn't. And he got together with some other like-minded souls, and they became pirates. And he was undoubtedly one of the most sadistic, downright psychotic, just awful, awful person. And he made a pretty good career as a pirate. But eventually, they were sailing along the coast of Panama, in this typical part of the Mediterranean area, looking for the Spaniards or anybody else to plunder, and they got hung up on a sandbar. And they stayed there, and I suppose they thought, well, maybe when the tide goes up, we'll be floated again, or maybe the tide was up, and they sat there anyway and they began to starve. They began to eat food, so they thought, well, we better go ashore. The shore was not far away, it was kind of parallel to the shore. And they could just see was jungle landscape in there, so they got in their small boat, and they went ashore. And they started wandering through the jungle looking for something to eat or something to drink, and they happened upon a band of the local natives, a local tribe. Or perhaps I should say the local tribe happened upon them as they wandered around, because the encounter ended when the locals ate the pirates.
Oh, okay.
They turned out to be cannibals. That was the end. And apparently at least one of them escaped somehow, because
To be able to tell the tale.
be able to tell the tale, yeah. So I doubt if one of the local tribesmen would have passed it on. But no, it was not always, they weren't always executed, but sometimes nature sort of took a
Nature
hand
took care of it.
and got rid of them. Now we'll look at another one, please. This is quite a famous one. This is Henry Morgan. Henry Morgan was a Welshman. And Welshmen were known for their pizzazz, their peppery nature. And he looks a little cross-eyed in this picture, but it's a contemporary drawing. He was also in the 1600s there, and he became a very, very successful pirate. The English sort of winked an eye at him because he was doing such terrible damage to the Spaniards. He did noticeable damage. And the Spaniards, of course, were busy plundering themselves. They were plundering Mexico, and they had all this gold and other valuable things from the New World. So he was just plundering those ships right and left. In recent decades, I think we've seen 2 or 3 times when somebody has bought salvage rights to a certain area where a ship was supposed to have gone down, and they have indeed found, and some of them they found gold and things, but apparently the historical value of these things is greater even than
Greater
the
than
monetary.
the monetary value.
But they had gold, and jewels and so on. So his biggest strike, his biggest adventure was to strike a city or a town in Panama, Panama City. And the next picture will show us what that looked like. See, it wasn't even fortified, but the Spanish would put up these settlements, and I guess they were transshipment points, perhaps. One can imagine all the various things that would be coming through there, and of course more Spanish would be coming in on the ship. It would be a point of bringing things, and I suppose they brought small things to trade, but most of the time I believe they just took it. They were just like these pirates, whatever they were supposed to be doing. But so Morgan plundered this city. He captured it. They didn't stay. They never stayed in these places, with the exception of the old Vikings, set up a kingdom in Ireland, stayed there for 100 years or more. But then they went back and did some more robbing. Eventually, they were caught by the British Navy, and the British Navy forwarded them back to England. And in England, at the time, William III was on the throne, and he was just king because he had married Mary II. And Mary II was the next to the last one of the old Stuart people, dynasty there. But he knighted him.
Oh, really?
He wound up knighting him, made him governor of Jamaica, sent him back. So this pirate, this big old Henry Morgan, had all this money, and of course the government never took the money back somehow. You never hear about it. They're demanding the loot. And I'm sure the pirate, most of them buried it somewhere so they could get at it again. I know this French one had buried a bunch of loot somewhere, and of course, no
people still looking for it.
People are still looking for it, yeah. But he, so Morgan lived out his days in some peace and with respect and all that. Sir Henry Morgan. Now, the next picture, I believe, is the one of, yes, this is another Henry. This is Henry Every, in the garb of the day, of course, wielding a sword and a little corner of, I think it's supposed to be a corner of his ship. They had these big old tub-like galleon ships at that time. They must have been awfully uncomfortable to sail in.
Oh, yeah.
So these people would have been hard, tough as nails to do it. But there he is anyway. He was also known as Long Ben, so apparently he was a tall fellow. Long Ben marauded down there in the same area of the Mediterranean, or the
Caribbean.
Caribbean, yeah. He's down there, and his he used some other names. I mean, Avery was one of the other names he used, but he was one who made pretty good hauls. He had not been a pirate for too long. In fact, I think his total time being a pirate was not too much. But he made such a good haul that he simply retired, and you never heard of him again.
Oh.
Yeah.
Became respectable, huh?
Apparently became respectable. Yeah, so we have another one here now to take a peek at. Oh, this is another picture of him. You see how well he was doing.
Oh.
So he's down in some tropical place, and he has a servant carrying parasol over his head. See, the pirate flag is flying. There's a little stockade back there, and he's happy. Now, the next one we're going to look at is probably one of the most famous names in piratedom, and that is Captain Kidd. And he was not one of the most violent, rabid pirates, not really the most colorful of the crowd. This is a warrant, the actual document for his arrest. He had started out as a Navy officer, and then he became a privateer, and he was commissioned to go out and fight these pirates and get rid of them. And he yielded to pressure of his crew, who said, we don't want to get this catch-as-catch-can piddling pay every now and then, and they would get a certain amount if they captured a ship. The way, of course, the British Navy was like that. You know, Jane Austen's brothers, for instance, made their fortunes by being Navy officers, and all of the loot was put together, and the captain would get the lion's share, but everybody in the crew would get something. And of course, some of these were pretty good. But his where he made his mistake was to attack a British. It was an East India Company vessel, and laden with very, very valuable things. So that was hitting them in the pocketbook. They were supposed to be out hitting the Spanish, but they did that. When he realized that he was a wanted man, he probably was maybe sorry he had done that, but he realized that go back to that picture. Yeah, that's the second picture. We had the warrant first. This was a later report of it, and murder and piracy, and of course you inevitably killed people in the course of these things, no matter how relatively good a pirate you were. But he, when he realized anyway that they were actually looking for him, hunting him, he buried a lot of his treasure on Gardner Island. Now, I don't know which Gardner Island, but presumably the one that's near Boston, because that's where they arrested him, was in Boston. And his wife, he was living in Boston, apparently, as an ordinary person.
Hey,
but
we're getting down to the last couple of minutes now.
Oh, all right. Well, this just shows that Captain Kidd, there was a movie, it was widely publicized, but he was executed. He was hanged. But now I wanted to, next picture, and finally end up here with two more lady pirates who were really more active pirates than the first one we talked about. This is an actual bust of this lady. She was born, her father was an Irish lawyer, and he played around with a parlourmaid, the chambermaid, parlourmaid, anyway, and the result was this little girl, and they went off, they stuck together. They went off to the New World, to the Bahamas. So she grew up in the Bahamas and Nassau, and hung around sailors and so on. Her name was Anne Bonny, and Bonny you may have heard of. There was also a bandit in the West, I think, named Bonny. But you can see she was a nice-looking young woman. She was working as a prostitute, not unusual for a youngster of those days, and they were captured. And what she did was not wring her hands and say, oh dear. She picked one of them out and married him. They got married. So they worked together, and they did a very handsome trade going. By the end of her career, she'd been a pirate for many, many years. They just retired from being pirates.
We have enough money. We'll just sit back now.
Yeah. So the final one, I'm kind of skipping over a little more detail about her, but the last one, the final picture here, well, no, that was one that showed two of these ladies wearing men's clothes, pirate costumes, as it were, and you could really not tell much. They avoided execution by claiming they were pregnant, which they were, but nobody knew because of all these robes. But this final one now is a Chinese pirate, and her name was Jing Shi. And Jing Shi was, again, raised up in very poor circumstances, and she was captured by pirates. She was on a floating brothel in Canton Harbor. They had floating brothels to accommodate the sailors and everybody. And they were all captured by pirates. And once again, she did not wring her hands and say, oh, no, mercy me, what will happen? No, she took a hold, and she became the prime helper, and eventually took over. A typhoon hit the area, and she had married one of these pirates, Zheng Qi. She had married him, and they were just cleaning up. It was marvelous. And she was known as the scourge of the South China Sea. And of course, the South China Sea would have probably some of this Western traffic, but they had all the spice trade traffic. And starting in the late medieval period, that was valuable commodity. The minute the Portuguese, found that was out there. Very, very valuable commodity. So she just cleaned up. And eventually, the Chinese emperor sent somebody out to do away with these pirates because they were marauding the coastal cities and all the traffic in there. Nobody was, getting through with anything. So they were destroying ships, stealing ships, doing all this, killing sailors. He couldn't touch him, couldn't damage him at all. They just kept right on. And she had allegedly over 1,000, something like 1,500 ships in action, and she ran it like a business.
My goodness.
And they had strict rules. They were not allowed to maltreat female captives, for example, unless they were beautiful and they wanted to actually marry them. That they could do. But otherwise, no hitting, no raping, no nothing. And she ran it. No looting on your own. You had to put it all into the common pot. But she paid them, of course, afterward. So what finally happened, the emperor was the first to blink. And in 1810, this is as late as 1810, he offered them an amnesty. All they had to do was stop pirating. Nobody had to give back anything. She had thousands, 70,000, 80,000 sailors involved in all these ships. Nobody had to give back anything. And she eventually married one of her subordinates there, Zheng Bao was his name, and they went off somewhere and ran a casino and a brothel and lived happily ever after. I think that last is a wonderful story. But you can see that pirates really kept things moving.
They did. I think we're at the end of our time, though. My goodness.
And they undermined the Spanish to an appreciable degree.
So pirates really served almost some good things in our history.
They did in some ways. These ones that were Robin Hood.
Kept us on our toes, anyway.
Like and of course murder and all weren't considered as terrible.
Right.
Then and doing the decent thing as it is now.
Expected way of life, unfortunately.
Yeah. Although some of them weren't so bad.
Yeah. Okay. Know more about pirates now.
Yeah.
That's great. Interesting stories. Okay, let's see what our announcements are. We have the encores of the week's Village in Motion, Saturday and Sunday, beginning at 9:30. Saturday at 8 o'clock, we have the George Mason Cabaret. And we have Sunday at 4 and 7. Alternative medicine, sleep. We're supposed to get some sleep? All right. Monday on Village in Motion is Halloween, and we're going to have top movie villains. That should be interesting. And Spotlight on History. Monday's feature at 2 and 8 will be the resident council nominees, and at 5 and 9 will be the Catholic Mass. And I think we have a special guest who has just walked in, a crybaby.
Did somebody say Halloween?
It is.
It's coming up. I'm just so excited for Monday. I had to pull out my outfit today. I'm a crybaby, yes, but on Monday I will transform yet again.
All right.
But I wanted to remind everybody of the Halloween decorating contest and trick-or-treating we're having here on Monday. So as you can see, I'm geared up, ready to go. We have trick-or-treat bags at each front desk. You can pick it up, and with that, they'll also give you a listing of every office that you can go and trick-or-treat and get candy at, and also see some of the great decorations in the offices. And I know also staff will be dressed up, maybe something like this, let's hope. So come around, see the fun and excitement on Halloween. And then one last thing I wanted to talk about was the Halloween Pet Parade this Saturday.
That's right.
So that's at 2 p.m. in the Hunters Crossing Conference Center. Come have some fun and get into the spirit and be ready for Monday. You never know what you're going to see.
Exactly. I've gotten a peek in some of those offices. Okay. Remember that the Staff Appreciation Fund is underway, and we need to let the staff know how much we do appreciate keeping our place clean, serving us, being on tap for us when we have problems in our apartments. But we have also the Troubadour coming up, so stay tuned.